Hi there, my name's Zach Bisker. I'm the owner here at Miata Source in Minnesota, and today I'll be introducing our newest build, Project MX5 Source. This is our 1990 model Miata that we've had for 10 years now, and the last couple years it's been sitting pretty shamefully under overhang, in pieces, not running for probably 5 years, I would say. And so we got to the point last year where we were cleaning up and we were deciding what we're going to do with this chassis. And so the two decisions were to sell it as is, scrap it, or rebuild it. And so luckily it's still here today in one piece. And so we were lucky to be able to document our entire rebuild process of this car on video and pictures. We've learned a lot in terms of the last couple of years of running Miata Source and servicing customer vehicles to be able to apply a lot of my favorite or desirable parts and mods, mostly for a street car. And this is kind of how we built it. And so we're excited to be able to share this whole series with you guys, and I hope you guys enjoy it too. Thank you.
Brief history about this car before we start our video. Bought this car back in 2015 from a local Mazda dealer that had it as a mechanical special. That mechanic special meant a ton of broken hardware from the old CarTech turbo kit. So in the end, what we had to do is we had to remove all that stuff and put on a nice fly Miata turbo kit. Did all the basic mods like standalone, E85 exhaust, suspension, clutch. Turned out to be a really nice car. Never really had any problems with it while I was driving it other than basic stuff. Dynoed at about 233 wheel horsepower. I have a pretty good video on the whole overview, so go ahead and check that out on my channel. Got to enjoy that car for about 5 years, but unfortunately for the last 5 years, the car got to sit under our overhang, collect dust, parts ripped off it as we needed them for service cars, and the condition that you saw earlier in this video. Alright, enough reminiscing about the past. Let's get started on this build.
Alright, well I got it cleaned up enough, so I'm going to move it into its spot where it's going to sit next to my other car that isn't getting done, and we'll bring the parts car in, get that thing stripped down, save all the parts, put any inventory that we don't need for it on the website, and then we'll bring the next parts car. So we got two that will be combining this car to make one. I think the first thing we need to do, as you saw in the introduction video of how nasty and dirty this car has been for sitting for so many years, mostly outside under the overhang of the shop and with no top, so you can imagine the cobwebs and dust and dead box elder bugs are making it a kind of a dreadful project to look at and yet even work on. So let's get this thing cleaned up so we have a nice canvas to work on.
Alright, so in the recording there's kind of a gap on what we've done, but it's basically sitting in the exact same place that it was when we first cleaned out the interior. But we pulled the dash. I had a friend that needed the harness that I had since I'm going to put a stock harness in since I modified it. So we took all that apart. So basically at this point now we're just going to the car kind of prepped for the reassembly. So that's what we'll be doing here now.
No one else will know, but I'll know that under my carpet is a clean metal floor. But also prepping this area is going to be pretty important for another step later in our build. During the primitive times of my car building experience, I didn't have the proper tools to make a clean cut, or maybe the patience, or maybe both. So here we're cleaning up some of the rough cuts that I made when I originally installed the roll bar in our car. The brake master cylinder was leaking pretty badly and caused a brake fluid to get on the paint, which then caused it to rust and chip away. So here we're just getting rid of the rust and then prep it with some cleaner to make sure it's nice and clean before we apply the 415 rust inhibitor base. This will be a good way to kind of seal in the raw metal, but also keep it from rusting in the future and probably be a little bit more durable for a future leak. Missed a couple steps here, but we've sanded the entire engine bay down, and then we added some self-etching primer before we start applying paint, as you see now.
Alright, we got the engine bay painted, got a couple coats of clear coat. We're gonna give it a couple days to dry before we start pulling anything or doing anything crazy in it. So we'll go get to the next step.
Here we're just masking off the red paint for the engine bay from the frame rails that are below it so that we can get a nice good line, which you'll see later here. We're applying some of the Pour 15 onto the lower section of the frame rails as just an extra way of protection. It's a good option because it's not going to see any direct sunlight, so it doesn't need a top coat. But it's also going to be a really nice, durable, low gloss option for this part of the car. For some reason, somebody used RTV instead of the $5 taillight gasket from Mazda. I painted the trunk in the past with just some generic red from Home Depot, but for some reason it's a really weird orange, so I had to respray the trunk again.
Alright, following doing the engine painting, we're replacing the entire wiring harness. And the reason for that is because when I did the turbo build, I modified a lot of the harness, a lot of the connectors, and I just felt like it'd be easier just to pull a harness from one of our parts cars. So we have a 1990 unmodified harness here. We're gonna do a couple things to it. Nothing that's gonna cut, but is reversible, is we're just gonna remove the airbag system wiring, the two blue plugs going to the engine bay, all the wiring leading to the module, as well as the wiring going into the fuse box is all its own separate harness. So shouldn't require modifying the actual engine harness. It's its own system. Thanks to Lance on Miata.net, I was able to confirm that based on one of his posts. So we'll start getting the engine harness prepped. Alright, so we got the full engine harness removed. What we did here is we removed all of the airbag system wiring. The fuses and everything from the fuse box is removed. This will clean it up a lot, and I guess if you're really concerned, a little bit of weight savings. This is not even including the whole airbag system anyway, so we still have the airbag, all the front and side sensors that go in the fenders that was previously removed when I had this car turboed and everything. So we'll get this harness in and we'll continue on.
Removing the airbag wiring from the harness made it a little bit smaller in the brackets that come from factory, so we had to use some zip ties and electric tape to kind of secure it in place, but it definitely made it a lot easier to get through the firewall. After painting the engine bay, it was hard to start putting things over the paint, so here we're actually starting to do kind of a partial wire tuck, not totally to the point where we're modifying it, but just finding more convenient places to put the harness. So we'll show that at later in this build. For those who are going to follow the build, this scene right here is going to be what's going to make this build kind of controversial to a lot of people, but in the end it's going to be pretty exciting. The one thing I want in all my cars is cruise control, so we're able to retain the factory cruise system with this build, and I'm pretty excited about it. I don't have a lot of shots of me sandblasting, but I would say sandblasting and spray painting was probably the most common thing I did with this build. Well, that does it for episode 1 of Project MX5 Source. Pretty excited to get to this point. First time to see any progress with this car in the last 5 years, so feels good. If you stick around for episode 2 coming soon, we'll be prepping the suspension and the drivetrain to make this car roll out for the first time in 5 years. Just want to thank everyone for watching and stay tuned for the next episode.